This is every trick that you need to build your best roller coaster in Minecraft. Now, one of the hardest steps when you want to build a roller coaster is figuring out what path you want that roller coaster to take. So that's why I think this user has the right idea. Here they started by flying around with an elytra and then use that as the basis for their path for their roller coaster, which I think is just great. If something's going to be fun with an elytra, then it's definitely going to be fun in a roller coaster. I mean, they're both thrill rides, at least this one I'm not going to die of kinetic energy. And now that we have all these big heights from our elytra path, it's time to find out a way to get up to them. I mean, a sudden drop's only good if you can get the build up to it. And I think how this user does it is particularly interesting. Here they have it so that the minecart gets slowly moved up the powered rails by turning them on and off. That way we're maintaining some amount of momentum, but we're also building up the stakes before that big drop. And hey, it also makes it less likely to have traffic jams on your roller coaster, which if you're trying to have multiple rides operating for your ride operator, could be a good idea to have in. And then building the fall is the easy part, but what's tough is maintaining some of that thrill after you get past that big drop. And that's why I think this floating rail solution is the best way to do that. See, by placing rails on top of trapdoors and then flipping them down like so, we can have it so that you're riding over what looks to be thin air, but really it's just that the rail is connected to this bit of the trapdoor. And then from our floating rails section, we're then gonna one-up it even further and make it look like our rails are floating in the middle of nothing. Really, just an entire roller coaster built out in the void. And the answer for this is just using unlit dark concrete, since black concrete will give the illusion of just being out in the middle of nothing. And at that point, you decorate the tunnel however you want. In our case, we used cobwebs to make it look like Space Mountain. Or if you're a little trippier, then you could go and try to make it look like this part in the Winnie the Pooh ride. Basically anything could be a heffalump or a woozle, so however much of a nightmare you want to build out here in the dark abyss, that's for you to confront. And then from that part of our Disneyland inspiration, we enter into another one with our lantern room. With water lining underneath the track, it feels like a scene out of Tangled. And while it might not seem very romantic to ride this by yourself, I will mention that if you place down a boat on the minecart tracks and then roll a minecart into it, then you're able to have two players ride this roller coaster at the same time. Which, I mean, come on folks, it's called a tunnel of love for a reason. And they'll appreciate riding in a boat when they get to this part, because inside of a boat, you're able to survive any kind of fall damage. And that might be just what they need when they get to this over 100 block fall in the middle of our roller coaster. Taking inspiration from the dropper, we have them fall through this giant rainbow spiral onto our tracks below, which might be a little terrifying on the drop down, but they should have faith in the fact that we don't want to get sued. So we're not going to let them die down there, at least not anymore. And then when it comes time for them to move on from that sudden terror, what we'll do next is turn our minecart into an actual boat. Since with the help of soul sand underneath water like this, with enough speed, we're able to bounce our minecart across the bubbles like so, which I just think is so cool. It's like you're skipping rocks. And I mean, I'm gonna like anything with skipping involved. Just remember that on Java, if you do this, you're gonna get a lot less momentum carried over than if you do it on Bedrock. So make sure to measure out how often you're gonna need powered rails to be able to get the momentum back. And we can move on into our next part of the course, which is that we don't just have to have our minecart be a boat, but rather turn it into a submarine. Yeah, ever since 1.17, we're able to waterlog our rails. And so, with one slope and hopefully a water-breathing potion for whoever's riding, we're able to turn a nearby coral reef into some of the best decorated parts of the course. I mean, it even lights it up down there. And then after they got a bit more splash than they were hoping for in this mountain, we just throw them right into another bubble elevator and move them back up to the rest of the course. Which, I should say, a bubble elevator makes for a great way to get your players from point A to point B both quickly and cheaply. I mean, if we were trying to do this with powered rails, it would not only cost a whole lot of gold and redstone, but it also means that our footprint for the build has to get so much longer. Whereas with one of these, we just shoot them right up to the top, and we save both time and resources. Good for us and our guests. But really, what's the point of adding a big elevator to a roller coaster if you're not also going to add in a big drop? And come on folks, they're called thrill rides for a reason. And what I love with this example that we have here is that we're actually dropping the cart from multiple different points of the track onto different freestanding parts of the roller coaster. Because let's be honest, just going straight down for a whole period isn't too interesting. Minecraft rails don't build up a whole lot of momentum, so the best that we can add in is the element of surprise. And so occasionally dropping them onto parts where they're going to be going up, going down, going off the rails. I think that's where it gets really interesting. And if you want to make a ride that your friends remember on the server, that's what you gotta add in. And we don't just have to let our cart fall from different parts of the track, we can also let it bounce too. Since with the help of slime blocks, we're able to detect when the player gets close and then launch them into the air, carrying our entities right over onto the next segment of the track. And if we're talking about satisfying parts of the roller coaster to watch, this is easily one of the best. And if you want to do a bunch of small hills sequentially like roller coasters sometimes have, this is actually a good alternative to just doing it out of rails going up and down a staircase of blocks. Just make sure that you do plenty of testing and know where the rails are actually going to drop the player. After all, we're trying to bring guests into the park, not lawsuits. And speaking of lawsuits, let's talk about a potential zoning law, since we don't just have to have our track exposed out in the open. I mean, especially if your players aren't sleeping, we don't want them to get bombarded by phantoms while they're on the track. It's a bad look for the park. So sending them through buildings gives them a change of scenery and also an extra bit of safety. And now we've essentially turned our roller coaster into a dark ride. So if you want to add a little bit of storytelling to your roller coaster, this is a good place to do it. And plus, it just looks really cool too. And that's exactly the kind of setup that we want to have before we do something like this. Since by timing it just right, we're able to have this portal ignite and send our players into an interdimensional part of the roller coaster, which instantly bumps up the wow factor of what we got going on here. I mean, it's essentially park hopping, and we're not like Disneyland where we're gonna charge extra. Ours is just a little bit more likely to kill you. But that's part of the fun, right? Well, I'll tell you what, even if they don't return back from the nether portal, in my eyes, that's a satisfied customer. It's at least not a negative review that they can leave on Yelp. Or if you don't want to literally send them into the nether, then we can always make believe that we're doing so. And instead, by having them go through the portal into a facade of the nether, we can make it look as if they're taking a roller coaster right down into the underworld. And for me personally, I think that's such an interesting concept. Plus, it means if you don't want to literally take them into the nether, we can still get the thrills of such without all the nether mobs spawning. Which is good, because I doubt a gas fireball is exactly what we need for track maintenance. Because if we want a better way to add in a pyrotechnic showcase into your roller coaster, we can actually do that with the lava that we have here. Now at first glance it looks like we're just sending them right into lava, but with those same slime block player launchers, we're able to make it so that our player is jumping over the lava fountains onto the next part of the track. If not also a good reminder for why you need to keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside of the vehicle. I already look like I'm cooked to a medium rare. I'm not trying to get into a full well done before the end of this course. And luckily, rails don't burn, so they're not going to either. Ultimately giving us a fascinating lava feature that isn't gonna hurt anyone. And then to finish up our nether part of the course, we can add in those gas that we were so worried about from earlier, but this time on our own terms. And by building a statue of a ghast, we can enter through its mouth to add a really fun way to keep the course going. I'm still not a fan of ghast fireballs, but if we're the fireball, I can make an exception. And then to add that final bit of danger as we escape the nether, we shoot our player right out of the ghast and into an arguably more deadly situation of a TNT player launcher. But the fact that us and the minecart are all entities means that we're able to send us sky high with one of these things. We'll just also have to make sure that we're able to catch them to keep them onto the rest of the course. Otherwise, they're gonna go right from the climax straight to the grand finale. And it won't be a happy ending, to say the least. And now that we've got a lot of fancy effects out of the way, how do we get the player back interested into the regular parts of the roller coaster? Well, I think this user's idea answers it simply. Having a sheer drop that takes us right from the top straight down to the bottom. And here, they've taken it a little literally by making it into a shears drop. I'll be honest, I just put this in the roller coaster for the pun, and you could too if you want to turn your roller coaster into a troller coaster. Or if you'd rather have your roller coaster feel like Rainbow Road, then it's worth noting that minecart entities are particularly weird in the way that they're able to phase through certain blocks. And so if you place transparent carpets on top of rails like this, we're actually able to send ourselves through each one of those different carpet blocks, giving what would have just been a normal drop a really interesting color scheme as you send your way through it. You just might want to build this carpet duplication machine from Eagle Eye before you try it out. But hey, carpets and rails are both able to be easily duplicated using the right slime block machine, so when you're doing one, you should do the other as well. And moving right from our brightest point down to our darkest point, we now make the player think that they're going inside of the mines, but really, they're going a little deeper than they were hoping for. And instead of feeling like one of the 7 dwarves in Snow White, we turn that hi-ho into an oh-no as they end up inside of an ancient city. And by sending them next to the right amount of skulk sensors, we could also get a couple of ward and scare actors to chase them around too. Just make sure we're keeping some elevation so that they don't catch them. Some riders might be sensitive to loud noises, if you catch my drift. And unfortunately for them, that's not the only scary thing that we left down here in the ancient city part of the coaster. Since by moving along, we'll instead be greeted by these scary dripstone teeth that line the statue. And much like the gas before, we're going right into this creature's mouth. But hey, at least we're not dropping you on top of the dripstone spikes. Those can still damage through the minecart, so thankfully they're just off to the sides here instead of actually used in a trap. And really, what would you expect inside of a warden statue's mouth other than an ice cream mountain? I mean, maybe that's why its teeth look so bad in the statue. It's just been eating too many sweets. And taken after Dr. Chosen's idea here of having the confectionery carnival map, I think it's a particularly fun juxtaposition to have your players go from something so scary into something so sickly sweet. And really, if you're stuck between what kind of roller coaster you want to build, I think this proves that if you do it right, you're able to mix themes together and make your roller coaster more memorable instead of having to choose just one or the other. And after we climb to the summit of this ice cream mountain, we go from lollipops right over to loop-de-loops. As here, we start to make our roller coaster fold in on itself. Getting pretty confusing and definitely a little repetitive, but if you have a redstone system in place, or it only does this one time, then we're able to surprise the rider without getting them to roll their eyes. And I think that's just the right amount of pranking that we want to do in this. And by this point, we've taken them through quite the journey. So how are we supposed to top that? And if you ask me, the idea here is really just to build up the scale of your roller coaster into an incredible height, literally. I mean, it only takes one look at this user's wooden roller coaster to see just how impressive it is not only to take your player from build height down to the bottom of the world, but to also build the track into the sky like this, proving that your roller coaster doesn't always have to try and show you something interesting off to the sides of it, when in reality, sometimes the most interesting thing you could be looking at is just the sheer scope of the rest of the roller coaster that you got coming up. After all, it can get hard to appreciate what you've built just in first person, so giving the viewer a chance to explore the rest of the roller coaster within view and see just how much they've climbed through, I think that's a good way to build up to the grand finale. And on that topic, the best and final way that we end off your roller coaster is with a cactus. Yeah, I know, it doesn't sound like the most fun, but roll into this and you'll be stopped right there on your tracks, breaking the minecart, putting it into a hopper, and getting ready to do the whole thing over again. Which, speaking of, here's our roller coaster presented in its full glory. that, folks, if you liked this roller coaster, then YouTube thinks you'd like this video, where I tried the deadliest Minecraft roller coaster ever built. So check that out on the second channel, and have a good one, alright?